really cool catching up with our great friends at Tearfund. They do a lot of good things, and they've been recognised as one of the largest aid agencies in New Zealand. They've actually been following the apparel industry for quite some time and doing some research around them.
Well, the Ethical Fashion Guide's been going for a number of years, and this year focusing especially on shoes. Welcome to the show, Morgan Theakston.
Thanks for having me.
Morning, Morgan.
So tell us, why did you decide to go and look into shoes this year?
Yeah, so we've been researching the clothing industry for years, and we've seen really positive change, but we felt that shoe companies were slipping a bit under the radar, and we know that there are many of the same issues as in the clothing industry. So yeah, we decided to focus on shoes and figure out what they were doing in their supply chains.
Shoes are super popular as well. People love their kicks.
Absolutely.
Right, there's whole subcultures around Jordans and all that kind of stuff. And
Yep,
you know, like,
definitely.
Oh, I'm Seller, being quiet there.
Don't you make a point of me
sitting there in his Air Force Ones
as well. Yeah.
I do like shoes.
Yeah.
I don't have enough money to spend on them, but I do like looking at shoes online. So how has this impacted the industry? Like you said, you've seen some pretty good change, right, around starting to release information about how ethical some of the products are that we buy and wear. Have you seen a push into a better direction in response to it over the years?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest places we've seen change is when we started this research when companies didn't really think they had a responsibility for their supply chains, and we're seeing companies really take responsibility now. And also when it comes to knowing where their products are being made, a lot more companies know where they're made, which we call tracing. So they're figuring out the names and addresses of their factories. And of course, when they know where they're being made, then they can start monitoring the conditions, making sure worker rights are upheld, and etc.
Well, how do you flip that around to the consumer then, Morgan? Because, you know, ultimately, the consumer is responsible for buying their shoes. So how do we get it into the heads and minds of even the young people that, hey, you need to make a conscious decision when you're buying footwear and apparel that maybe it's not quite right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have heaps of information in our article, actually, that released today around kind of what consumers can do. And we're just trying to really encourage people to love the shoes that they already own, love the clothes that they already own. The most ethical and sustainable shoe collection is the one that we already have. So we just really encourage people to love it well, to repair shoes instead of replacing them, because we know that it's the rates of production and rates of consumption that are increasing that are really wreaking havoc on people and the planet. And so we just say, love what you already have.
How do you score companies? Because I've seen you've given sort of like a percentage on different brands and things like that, and some of them have scored 0, which is not too great.
We should name them because it's in the article.
Yeah, it's all in there. But these are people that basically chose not to participate to get a 0.
Yeah,
right.
Get a 0.
So how do you actually score it, and what is that percentage? What is that based on?
Yeah, so we score brands out of 100, and we have a 46-question survey that scores brands' efforts to address the risks of worker exploitation in their supply chain and how they reduce their impact on the planet. So those companies that got a 0, when they don't participate, because some brands do choose to participate and it's great, but when they don't participate, we assess them on their publicly available information, so what's on their website. And this is because we believe that transparency around what they're doing has to be the standard. When we don't know what brands are doing, there's no way for us to hold them accountable to their claims. And so, brands that get a 0 had literally no information on what they're doing in their supply chains, how they're protecting workers, how they're reducing their impact on the planet. And we score brands on a wide array of factors. So we look at whether or not they're paying living wages. We look at if they're working to pay living wages. We look at if they know where their shoes are being made. We look at sustainability. So have they made commitments to reduce their emissions? Are they using sustainable fibers? So it's really a comprehensive survey.
The bigger brands actually took me by surprise that they're doing okay.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I mean, all the scores are low, right?
Yeah.
So I think the highest is high 50s. And I would say, with the bigger brands, one, they are global. They have a lot more consumer pressure on them. So they also have heaps of resources. They have tons of money, tons of staff. And so they're able to invest in the systems that our survey assesses. So things like going to their factories and monitoring them, that's really expensive. And so they're the ones that are sort of on the front lines doing that.
Yeah, interesting, because you think of the bigger companies do really have power to change, right? Because, they're dishing out massive contracts to people in terms of providing the stuff for the shoes. And if they say, we want your factory to be up to a better standard for your workers, or we're not going to buy from you anymore, they will up the standard, right, if that's what they demand. So I guess as consumers, if we are putting the pressure on them to want that as well, then they will follow suit because they're just following the market.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. And I think we have to really push, though, So that is true, but what they can't do is say, you need to up the standard of your factories, but we're still going to pay you, peanuts. We're not
Yeah,
going to pay
right.
you enough. And so we really have to look at kind of that power struggle of the companies. If they want these factories to actually uphold these standards for their workers, then these companies will start paying them a fair wage. Because, of course, when people are just focused on putting food on the table, they're not going to be like investing in sustainability and investing in health and safety standards and things like that.
I'm just thinking again of the youth who, they're just smashing buying shoes. My son, who's 18, he's ridiculous with the amount of shoes that he buys. And I guess that if you're going to introduce some of these things or you want these kids to maybe repair shoes, which I think is a hard ask, getting these young kids who are focused on fashion. I would love that to happen, but I think it's a big challenge. Prices are going to go up if you're going to command people to maybe invest in better work rates and better pay for people. So with the cost of living, how does that marry up,
Yeah, so what we're encouraging people to do, one is just to do anything they can to play their part. We're aware that people have different socioeconomic backgrounds and different things like that. So what we say is buy less, so that when you do need to buy, you might be in a better position, financial position to buy quality. And I think the really big challenge there is, addressing that consumer culture, that sneaker culture, and the idea that you have to have new things when trends change. And really encouraging as well secondhand purchasing. A lot of times you can go on like Trade Me, Facebook Marketplace, and you can find things that are in real gently used, sometimes even new condition. That's how I tend to find shoes. So that's what we're trying to address.
I think there's something in there. That's cool.
It's hard when you look at, because my wife's been quite into this, looking for sustainable brands and things that she can wear. She's quite, concerned about this. And we were looking at a sneaker website the other day, like a New Zealand brand, and they're sustainable, it seems, right, on their website and everything. But then, I saw Allbirds only got like a 26 out of 100, which really surprised me because I thought Allbirds would have been like way up there because of their whole marketing and everything is very environmental and that kind of stuff. But then they kind of scored lower than some of the big brands. So it's really difficult, to know what you're buying.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Allbirds will surprise a lot of people, but I think it's a really great learning point. So Allbirds is a key player when it comes to using sustainable fibers.
Yeah.
They use New Zealand merino wool. But the reason that they scored low is because, as I said, our survey is very comprehensive. The reason we got into this is because 28 million people are in forced labor, and fashion and footwear in the top 5 industries at risk of making products with forced labor. So we really assess the human impact side of things, and Allbirds has very little to no transparency around, are they paying a living wage? Once the merino wool comes from New Zealand, it's shipped off to China to be turned into fabric and then turned into the shoe. And so we want to know, what are the working conditions like in your factories? Are you paying fair wages? And they don't have information on that. And, are they doing well behind closed doors? Maybe. But with knowing that the majority of people who make our shoes can't afford to put food on the table or meet their basic needs, we need transparency around this. And we really believe that real sustainability has to include sustainable wages and livelihoods for the people that make our shoes.
Have you been to any of these factories overseas in China?
Have what?
Have you been to any of these factories overseas in China?
I have not, but previous people at Tearfund and on our research team have been to factories in Vietnam and Bangladesh and different places.
It's a real great thing what you guys have released because, as consumers, there's a disconnect, right? You just see the end product and you think, that looks cool. I like that. I'm going to buy it. But if you saw everything behind the scenes, you might be not so keen or even disgusted and be like, no, there's no way I'm ever paying for this when you saw what happened. But because we don't see it, there's kind of ignorance is bliss and you can just plead innocence. But really, once you see the information, well, it's harder. It's harder to ignore it, isn't it?
Well, on that note, there's a 5 R's that we as consumers can be aware of, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the 5 R's that we're encouraging people to live by are to reduce, rewear, repair, rehome, and to raise their voice. I think we've already covered this a bit, but reduce, buy less. And in terms of raising our voices, it's really important to put kind of constructive pressure on companies, ask them to do better. And we have some really great DM, email templates on our website that people can go, just copy, paste, change up a bit if they want and use. And put that pressure on companies.
It's very, very cool. I like your thought process around changing the sneaker culture as well. I think that's really, really important around our youth. Very cool.
Where can people go if they want to read their sort of full report?
Yeah, they can go to tearfund.org.nz/ethical fashion.
Thanks, Morgan, for taking time out to pop in and talk to us, because we know we're the first. You're going out to some big guns now, aren't you?
Yep. Thanks so much for having me.
No, thank you for popping through.